The sermon is entitled Living into the Promise. They say it all started on Christopher Street in 1969. Well, that's one place and time where society and life in this country began to change in ways never imagined. But it would be a while yet before love and inclusion became the bywords of a movement. The Stonewall Uprising burst into the mainstream media and into the living rooms of countless U.S. citizens across the country. And my guess is most people didn't know what to make of it. Years of discrimination and oppression boiled over. It began with trans women of color, with Black and brown queer people, and with people dying of AIDS who dared to fight back. That was the continuation of the movement. And here we are today, 56 years later, in a world and culture we maybe didn't expect. Decades of pain and suffering and joy and beauty brought us inclusion and acceptance and opportunities for love we never imagined. Like a wind-blown seed improbably taking root, a new life began in struggle, flourishing eventually into beauty and promise. Here, in this sanctuary, we remember. Here, in this community, we offer acceptance and invitation for every soul to be themselves, to thrive and grow, to be fully who they are with all their gifts and struggles and complexities, loving one another as life calls us to do. But it wasn't always so. Long before Stonewall, going back centuries even, one of the places queer people often felt the least welcome was in religious community, where fear of persecution or damnation was palpable. There are myriad reasons why this was so, particularly in the Catholic and Christian traditions where sexuality was feared and corporal pleasure or joy in one's embodied self was forbidden. Even as some communities and institutions began recognizing and accepting, as we move into the 20th century, the multiplicity of persons in their midst, treating people equally and celebrating the rich culture diversity brings, it took generations to break the silence around homophobia. So I'm just going to give you a little history now for background. It was well after the Stonewall Uprising that our own particular religious organization faced up to these challenges. The gay pride marches and demonstrations and celebrations that followed Stonewall slowly seeped into the consciousness of liberal religious organizations, and some had the courage to take a stand. As you probably know, in the 1980s and 90s, the Unitarian Universalist Association launched a welcoming congregation program to help us learn how to undo homophobia. It was revolutionary in its way, taking its cues from the success of the About Your Sexuality program for youth, where taboos were broken and minds were opened. The Welcoming Congregation program sought to unlock the hearts and minds of people in our congregations, and by extrapolation out into our communities. The early years seemed to focus on the welcome and inclusion of lesbians and gays. In some cases, bisexual identity seemed difficult for people to engage, and queer, non-binary, and transgender identity even more so. That began to change as more and more congregations participated in the program and sought certification. We grew into widening that circle, and you could no longer ignore these communities and identities any longer. Addressing transphobia slowly became a more prominent part of the program, and the expanding alphabet became part of the Unitarian Universalist lexicon. The Welcoming Congregation Handbook, created 35 years ago, contained a mix of both educational material and personal testimony. And most of the time, it was the personal testimony that got people to sign on to it, linking it all to our values and our tradition. What I remember about those days was the resistance of congregation members when it was proposed that we undertake such a thing. The questions were seemingly benign. Is this really necessary? We welcome everyone and exclude no one. But we don't want to become a gay church. And really, is this something we need to know? It was all very don't ask, don't tell. Invisibility was the byword. The few congregations who undertook exploring the story of LGBTQ discrimination and exclusion and persecution were kind of, in my mind, pioneers. They often discovered in the process the difficult reality of that welcome they espoused. At the same time, they realized the beauty of the diverse lives present among them and the similarities of love and affection among us, even when we express ourselves so differently. We began creating safe and welcoming spaces for each of us to live into our true selves, to live out loud, as it were. There were programs and workshops designed to break barriers and to keep opening that circle of inclusion and widening our welcome. I cannot underestimate the value and importance of becoming a welcoming congregation, which this congregation already is, as you know. My own personal story is rooted in this. In the early 1990s, as a ministerial intern, I was tasked with shepherding the Welcoming Congregation program through to a final vote in that congregation. I remember it feeling risky. I remember it being hard to get people on board. I remember it being just a handful of people engaging the workshops and programs. And I remember it unlocking something within myself. For it called me to see my own hypocrisy. The comfort of a closet would soon be confining. While becoming a welcoming congregation, that community made a space for me, even though they didn't know they were doing that at the time. But they made a space for me to discover and embrace the lesbian identity that I had chosen to ignore for so many years. And it showed me that I could be loved just as I am, even in that struggle, and that there is a community ready to welcome, affirm, support, guide, include me, and celebrate with me. We Unitarian Universalists were justly proud of ourselves back then, of who we were becoming, moving beyond the borders and restrictions created in our society and in other religious institutions. 30 years ago, there were great risks around coming out, and there was a lot of fear in the world outside our congregations. The risks remain real for too many people even now. For a time, it seemed to me that we, in the world of Unitarian Universalism in our welcoming congregations, could come off as a little smug, resting on our laurels. We did the work. We're better than all of that. That is, until we began to recognize that there is always more work to do. I mean, that's always the case. But there was work to do. And that this welcoming we were so justly proud of needs attention and renewal and expansion. That true inclusion of our trans and non-binary community means opening our hearts even more, letting these hearts be broken even a little, doing more work as we stumble to try and get it right. I'm retired from actively serving Unitarian Universalist congregations, and it's been a while since I regularly preached a Pride sermon every June and a queer-themed service in October. I looked back at some of those past sermons, and several things emerged. One was that each year I seemed to have something new to add. I might wonder, isn't this getting old, and aren't we done with this yet? But there was always something, whether it was a new letter to our acronym or a new way we needed to grow. And another was that all the changes we got to celebrate, same-sex marriage, the ends of DOMA and Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the joy and courage of our queer youth, the affirmation of the journeys and celebrations of our trans beloveds. But less inspiring was how, although there was so much good being done in our congregations, the world around us seems intent on slipping back into harmful ways of discrimination and persecution. We have worked hard to make sure lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people are full members of our faith communities. Being welcoming means striving for radical inclusion and creating spaces that honor every part of our identities, backgrounds, and experiences. And that is not always easy or simple. The questions remain. How open are we to fully understanding and accepting the reality of queer, transgender, and non-binary people? What holds us back? Is it just about comfort level or about what other people will say? Is it fear? Is it about recognizing that we all have a bit of queerness in us? So here we are in a welcoming congregation where we offer space and nurture for all to take root and flower, where we are leaning into the beloved community we dream about, embracing all our queerness, and on the cusp of great change. How do we effectively live into the promise of being a welcoming congregation? In the midst of changes and transitions, the community of All Souls New York City faces both a great challenge and an exciting opportunity. The challenge comes with momentous choices as you enter into the long process of calling a person to come minister among you. And the opportunity invites us to live into the words we proclaim with renewed energy and joy. You will, in the many months ahead, be called into exploration and conversation on what grounds this community and what calls you into this new era. Reverend Alicia Ford reminds us that in our covenantal faith, we abide not by creeds, but by negotiated and renegotiated bonds that hold us together in relationship. We attend deeply to the question, how are we together? We ask, how do we behave toward ourselves and others in ways that demonstrate our commitment to affirming the inherent worth and the inherent dignity of each of us? What guides that behavior and anchors those commitments is love. A fierce, revolutionary love, a love that is deep, challenging, demanding, nurturing, grounding. This is love where all our work for and ideas about justice are rooted. It is both personal and communal. Its aim is not comfort and contentment, but fairness and equity and joy. Author, feminist, and social activist Bell Hooks wrote, "Without love, our efforts to liberate ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation are doomed. As long as we refuse to address fully the place of love in struggles for liberation, we will not be able to create a culture of conversion where there is a mass turning away from the ethic of domination." The ethic of love must guide us in the coming months, where other challenges will beset us. UUA LGBTQ and Multicultural Programs Director, Reverend Michael J. Crumpler, notes, "We are witnessing a coordinated escalation of political attacks on LGBTQIA+ people. These attacks are particularly targeting trans and non-binary youth, families, and communities." The Supreme Court's decision delivered just days ago is evidence of that. It allows a state to deny trans and non-binary youth the kind of care they need for their physical and mental and emotional well-being, and this will result in irreparable harm. And we know these youth. They are ours. They are part of our congregations, part of our families. They are our friends, and we cannot look away. At the UUA General Assembly just a few days ago, President Sofia Betancourt affirmed our commitment She wrote, "We send our love and care to all the trans youth and their families, and we will continue to work with and on behalf of the trans and non-binary community to ensure that their dignity as human beings and rights are protected across this country." That's a huge task, though. I don't know exactly what the work is, but I am quite certain it is in our hands. It is a challenge to all of us to live into this fierce revolutionary love, however it plays out in your lives. Live into who you say you are, or who you dream you will be. Together we can break barriers and build beyond imaginary borders and strengthen this community of faith. Amanda Udis Kessler, who is the author of the closing hymn we will sing in a bit, notes that our Unitarian Universalist heritage tells us that we really are going to sit at the welcome table one of these days, and not just those of us in this room, all of us. But our work isn't just to sit at the welcome table, it's to set that table and to welcome others to it. We're here to transform ourselves and transform the world, beginning and ending with love. We are here to stand and sit and recline and dance and sing and ponder and talk and listen and hope and heal on the side of love. So let us celebrate Pride in all its exuberant joy and extravagant color and glitter. And as we enter into this same celebration, we are called to solidarity. Pride was born from protest, from defiance, from the righteous anger, and from the sacred truth that LGBTQIA+ lives are worthy, joyful, beautiful, and powerful. The charge before you, All Souls New York City, in this moment is to persevere, to continue the hard work of creating a community, a city, a world where our trans beloved, our queer beloved, and all our kids and all of us can live and thrive and be rooted in beauty and safety and grace and love. Today, let us carry that legacy forward in our words, in our actions, our relationships, and our commitments. And at the same time, take every opportunity, every wayward chance to let our hearts be broken open by this queer revolutionary love. In this love, we recognize one another. We can be bold and spacious and open to hold a multitude of identities in our community, to name and recognize each person, to celebrate them in their uniqueness, their true colors, honor each individual's worth and dignity, to know ourselves and to let ourselves be known, to know one another and to see one another, to know ourselves as expressions of the universe's longing for life, for thriving, for beauty, even when it is against the odds. Today and every day, may we say yes, a resounding yes to such defiant, inclusive, and beautiful revolutionary love. Amen and blessed be.